Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, episode 284, Party of One, an interview with Meghan Keane.
Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, the only podcast that offers a proven process to help you work through your grief, to grow, evolve, and create a future you can truly look forward to. Here's your host, Master Certified Life Coach, Grief Expert, Widow, and Mom, Krista St-Germain.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the podcast. So a couple of things before we get into the interview today, which I think you're going to really like. It's good. One, I want to remind you, happier holidays for widows who aren't done living is coming soon. We start on November 11th. It is totally free. You can register coachingwithkrista.com/free holiday event. This is important to me because holidays are a hard time for a lot of widows. Not completely hard, right? I'm not saying that it's all hard, but sometimes it's really hard. And there are some tools that I can teach you that will help make you have an easier experience of the holidays. And I want that for you. And so Happier Holidays is my free gift to you. We're doing it again this year. There's no VIP option this year. You can't buy anything. It's just for free. So if you want to participate, go to coachingwithkrista.com/free holiday event. And I'm going to go live 4 different times and I'm going to teach you 4 different things. We're going to record all the calls. If you can't make it live, no big deal. You can catch the recording and participate. We're going to have a Facebook group. I think it's really helpful to connect with other widows and share tips and stand in solidarity together. So we're going to have a little pop-up Facebook group that's private. And we're going to give away some prizes and try to bring a little bit of lightness and levity to something that's sometimes so hard. So go get registered before it gets here. Happier Holidays, coachingwithkrista.com/free holiday event. The other thing I wanted to say before we get started with Meghan is that I just had the most wonderful call with a woman named Stephanie. Stephanie, if you're listening, which I think you are, thank you. It's just such a cool thing that I get to do this particular work in the world, right? That I get to talk to people who may never be in a paid container of mine, but who I get to have quality conversations with, learn more about what's going on for them. And I'm so grateful when I find out that me talking into this microphone helps you. And so, Stephanie, I enjoyed our conversation, and I just wanted to say thank you for your candidness and for telling people about the podcast. And I'm thinking of you, and you know who you are, and you made my day. So I just want to say that. Okay. Meghan Keane. Let's talk about her. Meghan Keane. She's kind of got an impressive bio. She's the founder and the managing producer for NPR's Life Kit, which is a podcast and radio show that brings listeners advice and actionable information about personal finances, health, parenting, relationships, and more. You've heard of this, right? NPR's Life Kit. It's a good podcast. If you haven't listened, you should. Prior to founding Life Kit, she was a producer for NPR's award-winning podcast Invisibilia and a founding producer of NPR's TED Radio Hour. I know you have heard of both of those things, right? Because they are like top NPR podcasts. She currently lives with Margot, her mini dachshund, in Washington, D.C., and she was just a joy to talk to. One of the things I loved about Meghan is not just all of the insights that she's going to share with you from her book, Party of One, and all of the research and life that has gone into that body of work, but is also the fact that she knows what it's like to be a kid who lost her dad. So her dad died when she was 16, and she talks a little bit about that in our interview. But I think there's a lot of actionable things that she offers in this podcast that I think will make it valuable for you. I would love to hear what you get out of it. And I'm so grateful that she was willing to come on the podcast. Highly recommend Party of One, Be Your Own Best Life Partner, her book. And with that, we're going to jump in to my interview with Meghan. I hope you enjoy. All right. Welcome, Meghan, to the podcast. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for making time for us.
Of course. Thank you, Krista, for having me.
Yeah. So my listeners just heard this long, beautiful bio, but it would probably be much better if you introduced yourself and told them a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So my name's Meghan Keane. I'm a journalist. My whole career has been at NPR, where I've been mostly focusing on podcasts. I helped start TED Radio Hour. I was on the staff of Invisibilia, that wonderful show. And then I was asked to start NPR service journalism brand, which is called Life Kit. So it gives actionable advice to listeners, for uh, money, wellness, parenting, relationships, and everything in between. So my main day-to-day life is an editor and showrunner for Life Kit. Um, but what that really means is I'm always thinking about how I can be helpful to the public. That's, the
Yeah.
big service journalism, mission of NPR in general, but I get to do it really specifically within Life Kit and say, you think about refinancing a mortgage? Well, we have your back. Or you
Hmm.
having trouble talking to your kid about sex? We have your back there too. So my main goal in all of my work is to be helpful.
Yeah. What got you into that line of work in the first place?
I was never been a person who loves like a 5-year, 10-year plan because life
Yeah.
just is so fluid and changes. I just always knew I wanted to do journalism. So I was like, let me start there. And I loved the intimacy of radio. I fell in love with it in college. I went to Emerson in
Hmm.
Boston, which has a wonderful public radio station there that the whole community and beyond and into Massachusetts hears. And I just really fell in love with the medium and that type of writing. And I realized as I was doing, production work at Weekend All Things Considered really early in my career that um, my main goal and value was just to inform and help. And
Hmm.
so I was pretty flexible about how that happened. And so, with TED Radio Hour, it was like to inspire people, and that helps people kind of situate how they think about big topics. Or Invisibilia, it was a lot about emotional stuff and thinking
Yeah.
through complex problems. And then Life Kit, it's the most direct version of being helpful.
It's incredibly
um,
helpful. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I love the quick feedback loop of, hey, you told me how to like fix my medical debt. I saved $2,000, so it's kind of like shortened the feedback loop of help. And yeah, I got very, very lucky at NPR to kind of brush up against the right folks and
Hmm.
also, a dash of hard work, I suppose, but I've just stayed really open to how my career would look, and I think it's been beneficial.
Yeah. Well, as a listener, and I know that my listeners are like, wow, that's an impressive list of podcasts. Thank you. Right? Because your
Oh,
podcasts have
my
helped
pleasure.
me. So thank you for the role that you have played in that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And what I also love about podcasts and NPR in particular, it's a big group production. It's like a team, a really smart team that always helps each other. I love the Life Kit team. They are always so um, kind
Hmm.
and lovely about thinking about making really good journalism, take it really seriously. So
Yeah.
um, I play a
Not
small role.
surprising. Well, okay, humble. Okay. So besides your world in podcasting, you wrote a book, Party of One,
Yes.
Be Your Own Best Life Partner. Tell us how you came to that book, and then we're going to talk about some of the things my listeners will want to know about what's in that book.
Yes. So I did a Life Kit episode about singleness, about what does it mean to be single and um, how to basically decenter romantic relationships and the feeling of shame and stigma that can surround singleness,
Yeah.
and live a life that feels good and authentic to you. I had a comic that my colleague L.A. Johnson did, who also works at NPR. She's a beautiful artist and illustrator, and she did a comic version of it. And there was some like interest, and then all of a sudden we were writing a book. And so that part of the process was kind of fell into my lap, embarrassingly. But I once she said, "Hey, do you want to write a book?" I was like, "Yes," and it felt so right in my spirit because I've been joking that this is kind of my capstone on everything I've had
Mm.
to think and say about singleness. Um, and it comes from a place, no surprise, of personal experience, right? I have spent most of my adult life single, and I'm a millennial. I'm 35. I thought I was free of the pressures of needing to partner up. I thought I was somehow like I knew that that wasn't actually bothering me. But what I found was, with compounding with for me personally the rise of online dating, the cycle of rejection became so much faster and more frequent, right? And
Mm.
um I was feeling really frustrated with myself that I knew it was really great and amazing to be single and not settle, but in my body and my soul, I was like, oh, it still feels really bad. Like some
Mm,
of those messages have still seeped in, whether I like it or not, and I didn't like it. So the book was really my way forward of looking at research-backed tools and evidence-based tricks for how could you bridge that gap between knowing being single and on your own, or just when I say on your own, I just mean without a romantic partner. No one's
right.
ever really alone. With your body and spirit that just maybe needs a little bit of a helping hand. Because I was seeing a lot of um, you know, there are people who love being single and that's always what they've wanted to be. And I think that's amazing. And I think we can really learn from those people. But I was like, wow, I still have a little ways to go. So the book was me figuring out how to bridge those two parts of myself.
I love it. I feel like there's probably a spectrum there. And I think about where some of my listeners might be on that spectrum.
Hmm.
You know, for some, it can be hard to imagine even contemplating life without having a romantic partner and being your own best partner. Like, what does that even mean? And really, is that
Hmm.
advisable? And then others might be in a place where no, they're actually really looking forward to that and actively trying to figure it out. Right.
Hmm.
It's amazing how, from my perspective anyway, and I'm 48, the socialization is strong,
Sure
right?
is.
Get
Yeah.
it. At least there's the get an education part in there now too, as opposed to just go straight to marriage.
Right.
But yeah, so much pressure being put on getting married and being partnered. And then what I see in the grief world, because all of my clients are obviously widows, is that then that judgment that we have received from the outside becomes internalized, and then we put
Yeah.
pressure on ourselves to create, the next relationship, or worry that
Hmm.
we're damaged goods, and then we, better get out there, the clock's a ticking, people aren't going to want us, as though
Hmm.
that's the only path to happiness. So I'm glad that you've undertaken this topic, and it sounds like investigated it quite thoroughly, both personally and in
Yeah.
all the places.
Yeah. And I just want to say too that, this book is not to say you should only ever be single and always be happy with that. Um,
Sure.
or, forget about marriage. I'm just saying take a beat, think about what your values are, think about how you can love the life you have now.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to add so much more ease rather than always feeling like something is subtracted or missing,
Hmm.
just because you don't have a certain role filled. And something that I've learned by doing a lot of this research is that the key to self-regulation is not eternal zen. It is maintaining choices and
It's
feeling
not
the
eternal
feelings.
zen. I'm
Yeah.
Megan. Megan.
I know. I'm here to spread the word, but I do think there is this misconception that,
Yeah.
you know, if you are, living your hashtag best life, that you are always at that happy level, right? And, especially if you are someone going through grief, like of course you're going to feel upset. That feels quite normal to me.
Yeah.
And so it's not about saying, hey, you don't have a partner, forget it, just be happy. It's
Hmm.
about how can you be your own best partner in regulating your emotions, thinking about your anxiety, using tools like mindfulness to really strip away the judgment of those
Yeah.
thoughts and feelings, and just be kinder to yourself because it
Yes.
just feels so much easier.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. I agree with you. For me, it's about how can you live a rich, full human life, knowing
Yes.
that a human life is all the feelings and all the things. And as much as we have been sold the idea that we're supposed to want only happiness, it's not really what
Hmm.
we actually want. But I get
Yeah.
it. I get it, especially after, such a significant loss, in that we've had so much intense emotion and maybe didn't come to it with skills about how to support ourselves or regulate our nervous system. So it kind of makes sense why it's the last thing you'd want more of, you know?
Sure.
And you'd want to be pursuing quote unquote happiness, but no, I'm with
Feeling
you.
bad feels bad. I get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And that simply stated, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, before the show, and I have lots of questions for you about the singleness and all of that part, but since you did mention that
Mhm.
you also are the daughter of a widowed mom and
I
that your
am.
dad died when you were 16 years old. Yeah, I would love for my audience to learn a little bit about, you know, your experience. Maybe you have some wisdom and some nuggets. So,
Yeah,
what was that like for you? How did it affect the trajectory of your world?
totally. So my father, Jim Kane, was 60 years old when he died.
Hmm.
And he had non-small cell lung cancer, meaning he would have gotten this type of lung cancer even if he never smoked a day in his life. And anyone who's familiar with cancer knows that lung cancer is particularly
Brutal.
nasty in terms of life expectancy. So
Yeah.
he, I was a sophomore in high school when he went through treatment, and I turned 16 on June 3rd, 2005. And then the next day I was helping him down the stairs with my mom to take him to the hospital, and he never came out after a week
Wow.
later. So
Wow. That's fast.
yeah, so from like a diagnosis to death, it was about 9 months we had. And it
Okay.
was pretty harrowing, as you might imagine. And I give my mom so much credit because I don't have any siblings. So it was just us all of a sudden in the house together. And also say that we also have a had and have a strong family dynamic and healthy dynamic, but it was still really hard, right? I felt really lucky that with my dad, I didn't have anything technically unresolved, right? There wasn't any resentment. There wasn't things I wish he could have apologized for. But it still impacted the rest of my life, right? It's just a huge loss. And my mom, you know, I felt like she really handled it really well, and I think was open about how the grief was. And there was stumbling blocks for both of us about, she had to call me out on it and be like, you haven't talked about him in a year. I would really
Hmm.
clam up because I was in high school and everyone around me has all these alive parents, and I was in
Yeah.
my own like loneliness bubble and didn't know how to help her. But something I was really proud of my mom is that she really found ways to try out this new life of being a widow. And so she was going to a lot of different like clubs, organizations, volunteer efforts, and a lot of stuff did not stick. She found a lot of people did not want to be friends, or not ready
Hmm.
to invest in friendship anew in this way for her and her life. But the things that really stuck. She became a bereavement caller, essentially an NIH. So she would call people for those who had loved ones who had died within NIH care and would check up on them. There was like within certain time increments. And she did that for over a decade and really got a lot out of it. And she just became more involved in her community in ways that I thought were really impressive, and really, invested in me and made sure that I was okay. And so I know you were saying earlier to me before we got on, people think your listeners think about like how their kids are going through this, and the answer is they feel lonely, probably like you do, just in a different way. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think for me, I'm 20 years out now. Um, it came in some really profound stages of going into college. I was very much the person being like really resentful of a lot of my friends who had dads and, or had bad dads that were alive, right? Dads that were not less than stellar examples. And here I had my awesome dad who wasn't here anymore. But I found ways to, my mom was also really instrumental in getting me a grief therapist when I was 19,
Hmm. Did you
and
want
had
one?
me, no,
Okay.
I didn't want one. I did not want one.
Okay.
And she was like, I think you should do this and just go for even just 4 sessions. She really like
Hmm.
made here's like a what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like a small offering of like, this is what we're gonna start with. And that was kind of a gateway to for me thinking about therapy. And it was like kind of healed
Yeah.
the wound, the big wound that was like bleeding. And then I think I spent the rest of my life thinking about how it fits into my life. And um and we try to talk about my dad as often as we can and recognize it. And my mom will just mention to me on the phone still, like, it's his birthday, it's the
Mhm.
anniversaries, right, things like that.
Yeah.
And so I feel it's very complicated because I feel like I am also the person I am today because of that profound loss. And I don't know who I would be without it, but I still
Mhm.
wish I had had my dad. It's a
Yes.
very tricky feeling to hold.
Yeah, that makes so much sense though, because it is. Yeah, that when we just kind of got to make space for that, I think,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
those
And
two conflicting things are there.
I'm a journalist, and usually you would think that journalists want to get to the bottom of everything and and like be like, I'm gonna like investigate my whole father's life now. And I have actually kind of, how do I say this? It's like I have let some things be a mystery and keep
Hmm.
him alive in these like ways that feel good to me. And then I like to rediscover new things as things
Mm.
emerge. I don't like,
Hmm.
for me, the digging can sometimes be too painful to be like, I
Mm.
have all these things I missed out on with him.
Hmm.
But it's really beautiful when I learn something new about my dad, even 20 years after
Oh,
he died.
it's like, yeah, it's like continual gifts that just
Yeah.
kind of keep coming. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. So thinking about, most of the women that listen to my podcast are in a position that's similar to where your mother was. What words of wisdom would you give them from someone who's, been through it from the child's perspective?
Hmm. I mean, I think from the research that I did in this book, a really powerful group is transitioners, is what friendship expert Marissa Franco told me about. And I love this idea because I think when you're going through a big life change, you feel lonely, right? And so
Hmm.
some of your friends that are around you, all of a sudden, maybe some people can rise to the occasion and be really great, and other people pull away. Right?
Yeah.
They're like, I don't even want to think about how a death in my family would work, so they just like pull back, right?
Peace
And
out.
so, yeah, exactly. So what Marissa Franco talks about is this idea of transitioners, just basically people who are in life transitions, and those are people who are usually a little bit more open to
Hmm.
connect. They usually have similar-ish values as you, or at least going through something similar.
Hmm.
So, I mean, now what's kind of great about the internet is that you can find like super like niche groups. Like you could find like
Yes.
a widow knitter group, right? Like like like
Yes.
you could like women who bike and also have had a profound loss, right? I don't know. Like
Yes.
there's ways you
Yes.
can like, so I also too like I did a like it was called the dinner party. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yeah.
It's like it's this organization that basically groups up people who've had a loss in their life, and they
Oh,
have
no.
dinner together. And it's great. And I had
Oh.
a group here in DC for a while. I loved it. And it was at a time where it was only a few years ago, but I was like, man, I think I need a little extra support again.
Hmm.
And it was great. So that one obviously is some, people thinking about the topic itself of
Hmm.
grief and death and loss. But like, you know, I think it's good to remember that there are other values that you can also explore and things that
Hmm.
feel good to you, and look for people who are really excited about those too. Um, because it just feels that for me, new input is always good for me creatively, spiritually,
Hmm.
whether that's just like going to a game night that I see only these friends like once a month, right? I did this last night. And I was like, man, I left so refreshed because I was like, oh yeah, those are fun people. Like I haven't seen them in a while, and it just felt great, and it just got out of my normal routine. So if you're looking for community, I would say, like Marissa Franco told me, look for transitioners, look for groups, interest
Hmm.
groups that feel interesting, that align with your values and your identities, and then um, look for novelty.
Mm.
I think that's a good way to um, just like bring more either creativity into your life, new ways of thinking. Because I think what I write about in the book is like how rumination and the story you tell yourself can really box you in about your own self perception or how your life is going.
Hmm.
And sometimes it takes that stepping back and being like, oh, these other people are handling us in a different way, or
Hmm.
it just gets you outside of yourself a little bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say look for transitioners and look for novelty to like kind of help you step out of yourself.
I love that advice. Thank you. That is not what I expected you to say. And it's refreshing. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I want to talk about, the whole idea of being your own best life partner. So I'll just say for me personally, pretty shortly after Hugo died, I did not want to date again. I wasn't sure I ever wanted to be in another relationship again. That was my second marriage. First one
Mm,
had not ended well, and it was kind of like, damn it, if I could do all this work and find this person I'm so happy with, and then they can be taken away from me so quickly. Do I even ever want to do this again? Like, I don't
right.
know. Will there even be anybody out there that I can be happy with? But regardless of that, and I guess in part because of it, I did decide I don't want to get involved with anyone else again for me personally
Hmm.
until I feel really good about being with me, right?
Hmm.
And so what I see is some women who are in that place where they feel that way too. Some women who can never want to date again ever and have just decided that they don't want to be in another relationship, also okay. And then women who really can't imagine that it's possible to be happy without dating
Hmm.
again. Yeah.
Right.
So so how does your idea of being your own best life partner fit in to those, various ways of seeing romantic relationships?
Hmm. What I've been finding is that the more we all just turn down the pressure to partner, I just think that the nicer we are to ourselves and each other, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of pressure or frustration that single people have is with their married friends. The way their married friends talk to them about their dating lives, they treat it as entertainment, or
Mm.
they see them as less than for not having a romantic partner.
Yeah.
But then at the other side of that, sometimes people are in these marriages and they feel profoundly lonely and they can't tell anyone because they think they're supposed to be happy. So, and the idea too is that like maybe you don't get out of this marriage because then you'll be single and oh my God, isn't that terrible? And it's like, well, isn't being with someone that you can't stand like
Yeah.
worse? Like that feels very inauthentic to me. So reducing the stigma around singleness, I think, just helps everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of the people you mentioned who, struggle with the idea of being single and being happy or like seeing those things happening for them, that they need this romantic partner. I write about some techniques that are basically ways to like increase positive emotion in your life, right?
Mm.
So one of them is well, one first of all, even before we get to that, is that this idea of like radical acceptance, because I like the thing that is making people upset sometimes about a situation, I felt this too with my singleness, is the
Mm-hmm.
resistance. And like
Yeah.
the more you push, the harder it's going to be feel to be comfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
radical acceptance is this technique from dialectical behavior therapy. And it's not saying I'm accepting things that are abusive or harmful. It's just taking a beat and you're saying to yourself, how does it feel to resist? I notice I'm resisting. How does it feel to resist? I'm also going to acknowledge that these are the way things are supposed to be right now, or the
Mm-hmm.
things are the way they are right now. And you're
Yeah.
just admitting that this is the reality. You don't have to like the reality, but then
Mm-hmm.
you can at least like catch your breath and then move forward. And then this another technique I learned from dialectical behavior therapy is the ABCs, which is accumulating positives, building mastery, and coping ahead. So these are
Mm-hmm.
just ways to help you build the muscle of making your life just feel more overall positive and that you're less reactive to negative
Mm-hmm.
stimuli. So accumulating positives, simple as like I jokingly call it the little treat philosophy, where you're like, I'm just gonna help myself to like a little treat today. That could be a chocolate scone on the way to work or something, or it could be a beautiful bouquet of roses that you treat yourself to. It doesn't have to be something monetary. It could just be
Mm-hmm.
wow, I had extra time in my day so I could sit down and read a book. Isn't that wonderful? Like really noticing those positive
Yeah.
things in your day to day, those build up over time. And then you have building mastery. That's just feeling good about doing something well. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you're working on something like I'm not a very good tennis player. I like playing tennis. When I hit a really good forehand, which is like one out of every 20 times, I'm like, God, that felt good. Or it could be paid your taxes early. Or, did your you helped your kid with their homework and it went well. Like noticing when you do those things well and like acknowledging it. And then coping ahead is an interesting trick where you think about a situation that gives you stress, right? Or anxiety. And you think about yourself doing really well in that situation. It's not about, okay, what am I going to say in this situation or perfecting your script? It's about just being like, imagining yourself doing really well at that activity
Mm-hmm.
or that hard situation. Be like, wow, it almost gives you the sense of like, wow, I already did this.
And
And
like
I feel
getting into
good
the
about it.
feeling state of it.
Exactly. It's the
Yeah.
feeling state versus the thinking state. And I know these tools sound very simple. They're not meant to like upend your life and then you're like 100% happy all the time. But what they do is they build up this reserve
Resilient.
of resilience,
Yeah.
exactly, and dealing with stress. So I feel like that's just an I think that's just also helpful information for anyone to know. But I
Mm-hmm.
find it especially helpful if you are someone struggling with this idea that you absolutely need a romantic partner.
Yeah. Okay. So earlier you were talking about how you kind of intellectually knew, but your body didn't know. Is
Hmm.
is that how you kind of communicated that message to your body? Was there something else that was really helpful for you?
Yeah, yes. So a lot of it too was managing emotions and like actually understanding what I was upset about, or not even what I was upset about, but acknowledging it's okay to be upset just because you're upset, not putting
Yeah.
shame on it. So I did some reading about secondary emotions, and secondary
Mhm.
emotions are essentially the emotion, the way you color the feeling you have about an emotion. So let's say a date went horribly and I thought it was going to be great, and I'm like, man, I feel awful that like that didn't go well. I can't believe I'm still single. This is still happening to me. I'm putting a lot of blame and like negativity on it. The primary emotion there is, frustration, sadness, but the secondary emotion is shame, right?
Yeah.
And it's my feeling about feeling frustrated.
Yeah.
And once I could start to see how poorly I was talking to myself and the judgment I was putting on it, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's
Hmm.
not really helpful. It's okay that that happened. I can pull back and say, I'm just sad because I'm sad. And I'm
Yeah.
going to like feel this. And then I'm going to give myself a choice, a healthy
Hmm.
choice to distract myself, to feel better. Um, and acknowledge that sometimes everyone feels sad and just,
Yes.
yeah, stripping
It's
away
not
the
a character
non-judgmental
flaw.
part. Exactly. Yeah. Cause there's so many people I know who feel like I'm broken. I'm unlovable.
Hmm.
And I know for me that a lot of that frustration came from feeling like I had to wait for a partner for a long time. And then I
Hmm.
got one for a very short amount of time. And then I got dumped.
Mm-hmm.
And I can laugh about it now. And it was like, well, something's wrong with me.
Mm.
And all I had to step back and think was, this is just how relationships go sometimes. This is not a
Hmm.
character flaw.
Yeah, for sure. I like to think about it sometimes like um just reminding myself that pain is part of the human experience and but I don't have
Hmm.
to add suffering on top of it. I don't have to make myself wrong for
Completely.
my pain and then create suffering. Or sometimes I picture like pancakes. I call it pancaking. It's like we have this emotion and that's hard enough as it is, but humans, right? And then we're like, and I'll just shame myself for having that
Hmm.
emotion. Yeah, super fun. That's a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pancakes sound too delicious to me. I'm like, oh, I
Right. I
want more
know. It's
pancakes
like,
though.
right. Maybe we
But
should
you're
we should
right.
come up
It
with
is
a
just like it's just extra sludge on top.
yeah.
And it's just, yeah, it's a lot of extra weight to carry.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so in your book you talk about prioritizing other kinds of love
Mhm.
besides romantic love. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I came across this concept that has a fancy name. It was developed by a philosopher, Elizabeth Brake, at University of Rice University, excuse me, and it's called normativity, and it's basically this idea that we all, our society holds romantic relationships as the be all end all, and that anything else is less than. And what she points out is that, that really discounts all these other types of love and connections that are very important. And, there's also these really interesting research. I write about the Harvard study of adult development, and it was over several decades. Hundreds of men were studied for their whole lives. And one of the biggest findings that came out of it was all types of relationships are key to health and happiness. They didn't say, only married people and romantic relationships. The director of the study was very clear to say all types of relationships, friends, acquaintances, the casual
Mm-hmm.
ties, the mentors. All of these play an incredibly important role in health and happiness in the long term. And I just don't want people to think of friendship as like a bonus relationship. It is necessary. It's vital. Um, and it's interesting because we're really good at knowing how different types of friends satisfy different needs or interests, right? Like I have
Mm-hmm.
friends I love talking about Bravo and Housewives with. I have
Mm-hmm.
friends who I only talk about novels we're reading, and or friends I can go really deep on like emotional stuff, and other friends that I'm just we're just gonna have a good time and keep it really light. So,
Yeah.
but you need all the, but we're really good at like breaking down those friendships, but we're not good about that with romantic relationships. I find
Mm.
we're like, well, then no, that person has to be everything. And
Everything.
so,
Yes.
yes. So I think it's actually helpful to tap into, you already know this, that a diversity of connection is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so leaning into that and making it more intentional, right?
Mm-hmm.
And uh, so it's interesting to me too, because I think about even just coming to the office like 2 days a week for me. I'm like, oh yeah, like had a lovely conversation with a colleague I collaborated with months ago, and I learned something interesting about him, and I was just like, that boosted my mood just to have that short
Mm-hmm.
connection. Um, and I think we all know this. And so if you're interested in developing it, a concept I talk about in the book is the idea of being a starter. So make those connections and make the invite, because a
Yeah.
lot of people are thinking, oh, well, I don't want to bother them, right? And so instead, people are actually relieved when you make the invitation, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes are really flattered. And so, you know, if there's someone in your life that you want to get to know better, tell them that. Like, I think most people will not be weirded out by that. I think they'll actually be refreshed by that.
Yeah.
Um and I'm a big fan too of uh just like making rituals as well around connections, and being like, hey, we're going to do this thing once a month, right? Like this type of, and keeping it on a calendar, um because then you have less chance of people being like falling out, right? So much of adult social life is about calendaring. It's so
Mm-hmm.
annoying. And so sometimes just having an automatic, like, hey, this is on the calendar. Like I have a monthly
So like
meditation
every
group with.
fourth Friday we do X, Y, or Z.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I have a monthly meditation group that's all on Zoom, and we don't live in the same state. But it's on the calendar, and we're so much less likely to cancel because we've already put it on the calendar. It's already there.
Yeah. I
And
love
I'm
that.
also a really big fan too of just like not having like the big, okay, we're gonna have a big dinner, or we're gonna go out for drinks, or whatever it is. Like I love having those like short spontaneous moments, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm going to run some errands. Do you want to come along? My mom's really good at this. She loves doing errands with her friends.
Mm-hmm.
And or being like, hey, I'm going on a walk. Do you want to join? Like keeping it
Yeah.
really low pressure. Don't worry if it's day of. If you have, you probably will get, you might, well, not probably, you might get a no. That's fine. But people are always like, tell me next time, or they might reach out again. So y- I often hear like, oh God, it's so hard to make friends because everyone's so busy. Yes, but you can be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just making the offer, it's a virtuous circle that comes back to you.
Mm-hmm. I love it. There's so much goodness in what you just said. I'm also thinking about how, for a lot of people who have been married for a long time or have kids or both,
Hmm.
it is, even though we do know the value of friends. I mean,
Hmm.
if we answer that question intellectually, are friends valuable? Everybody says yes, but also we
Hmm.
don't necessarily spend our time in alignment with what we know. And it's pretty easy to
Hmm.
find yourself not having invested in friendships and really having given so much of your attention to, your romantic partner or your family, and especially if you've maybe been in a long-term caregiving situation, or, some sort
Right.
of terminal situation where it just all the energy was, you know, put into that. So, yeah, I think it's your suggestions on how to make friendships and just to get out there and do it sound
Hmm.
really valuable. Also, I
Yeah.
noticed my whole body relaxed when you said you had a monthly meditation. I realized that was not an invitation for me, but but I can think about, not only is it nice to have that monthly thing set up, to know that you don't have to worry about the logistics of it, but that there also seems to me to be just a peace in knowing that it's there, that
Yes.
the
Yeah.
possibility for connection is there.
Hmm.
and that there's
Yeah.
something comforting about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, and with these women, we don't get into anything super personal. We
Hmm.
met through like an online meditation course. So,
That's cool.
um, but uh it is, yeah, very calming, and it's like something that is around my values and something that is important to me, and it
Hmm.
kind of acts as a little like reset where I'm like, oh crap, I fell off my meditation the last 2 weeks. I
Hmm.
didn't feel good, and it's like, wow, that felt so good to do that and to share
Hmm.
it and talk about it, even if it's only for 30 minutes, and then
Hmm.
I reinvest in it. And so um yeah, I just think it's a wonderful way to also selfishly do what things you like to do and then invite people into it, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my joke about hosting. I love hosting people for dinners. I love cooking. And so, but I'm like, I don't have to leave my house. I get to
Uh-huh.
cook what I want,
Yeah.
and that feels great. And
Everybody
so
come to
like you
me.
can also like, yes, you can selfishly use some of these techniques to just be able to do things you really like,
Yeah.
and find other people who like them and join you in them.
Brilliant ideas. Brilliant ideas. Okay. I want to go back to the shame part. So you talked
Hmm.
about how society makes us feel shame about
Hmm.
singleness. Where did that start? Can you in the research that you've done like walk
Mm.
us through how we got here?
Hmm. Yeah. That's such a big question, right?
Sorry.
What I can tell you, no, it's true. It's true though. It's like it's both tale as old as time, right?
Yeah.
But it also isn't, in a weird, funny way, what I've learned in that there's this myth that, you know, marriage has always been for love, right? For
Mhm.
so many
Mhm.
decades and centuries, it was a tool for political power and gain, right? If even if you were lower class and had a farm, marriage was a way to acquire another farm and some more helpers on deck, right? And something else I learned, comes from historian Stephanie Coots. She wrote this incredible book about marriage, and I recommend it to anyone who's just really interested in like geeking out about this,
Mhm.
about how the concept of romantic love actually was invented in the Victorian era, more or less, right?
Mhm.
It's hard to always put like an exact pinpoint on these things, um, but the Victorian era was interesting because people, along with industrialization of America, were starting to be able to earn wages outside of their family, right? And so they were
Mm.
starting to live a little bit more on their own. They were starting to be able to, you weren't so dependent on your family to then need you to get married and then keep the family line going and rely on the family resources. You could
Mhm.
actually start to kind of support yourself a little bit more. And then there was also the pop culture of the time. We were just coming out of the Regency era, Pride and Prejudice, things like that, where we're telling you, oh, you can love someone for their mind and their themselves, and like put
Mhm.
favor that over money and resources, right? And it was also a time, Victorian area in America was a time when the privatization of the home was becoming more pronounced. So
Mm.
um, it was a little bit more of an insular time, and the love marriages, as they were kind of known, uh, were a way to protect that home. And so this is not to say that romantic love then was like, it was so enlightened of all of them, and
Mhm.
everyone finally was like, I can marry whoever I want now. Not exactly, of course. It was like, pretty heterosexual norms of, now this woman is meant to be like uphold the morality of this home, right? So you could marry someone that you love, but that love looked very, very different. um
Mhm.
and then so that was, I thought, very fascinating, that this idea of like love marriage was more or less invented and kind of in
Mhm.
recent-ish human history. Obviously, humans have always found each other and loved them in all different ways, in and outside of the bonds of marriage. But then I was also really interested to see how we just seem really attached to this narrative of what it means to be married in a very specific way, right? This Leave It to Beaver style of, we have two people at home, they have kids, they have their own house, say it with me, the white picket fence.
Yep.
And how I learned through Stephanie Kuntz, this historian, that that was actually such an anomaly in American history, the 1950s
Mm.
era of
Mhm.
suburbia, because it was a time when we had men coming home from World War II, looking for stability, there were higher wages. There was a spike in wages, so you could actually afford to only have one breadwinner at home.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah,
It's not the
exactly.
way
And
it is
which
now.
we know it wasn't that way
Yeah.
previously, and it wasn't that way before. Women were actually getting married at a an earlier age in that time period than they were even
Hmm.
60 years before. Not by much, but
Really?
technically there was a drop. Yeah. And, also
Yeah.
these new technologies for women, not for women, but marketed towards women about, look at this dishwasher. You don't have to work so
Oh,
hard.
yeah. I
You
got
don't
a
have to,
vacuum cleaner.
yeah, vacuum cleaner. Exactly. So it's this kind of like perfect storm that made us think that this type of setup was how it's always been, when actually, as Stephanie Kuhn told me, it was a speed bump. And
Hmm.
then it started unraveling very quickly, right? We had
Yeah.
women who wanted to get back into the workforce. We had women's liberation and birth control. And since that time, we've seen marriage rates go well. Since that time, we've seen the age of a never married woman go up in age
Hmm. Hmm.
steadily, and it hasn't dropped since like 1960.
Hmm.
So we just seem like enamored with this fiction of how marriage is supposed to go, and I
Hmm.
think that's really helpful to know, because then you can say, oh, this has never been true for everyone throughout all of human history.
Right.
That this is not how it has to be, quote unquote. That
Right.
there's, even if you do get married, you can still think of it in a way that feels good to you, right?
Hmm.
Or it could be that, you know, you have stepkids, right? Or something like, there's all these other arrangements now. And so this idea that it has to be this one specific way, I've just found is just so untrue. It's
Yeah.
but we're so in love with it still.
Yeah. It's interesting how we have made that into a fantasy. I'm always, thinking when people talk about their grandparents and how they were married for 50 years or
Hmm.
their parents, I'm like, yeah, but did your grandmother have her own checking account? Like, I mean, do we
Probably
know
not.
your grandmother wanted to stay in that marriage, or like how much
Yeah.
of that was just because that was the way that it was? And to see
Yeah.
this weird resurgence of like the whole trad wife thing is
Hmm.
wild to me.
Hmm.
But that's probably for another day. I don't know.
But well, it's interesting that you say that about like, oh, my grandparents, this was the way. It's also a good reminder that's one generation of people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not exactly
Yes.
how the generation before them also did it
Did it.
exactly right. So
Yeah.
you're right. It's just so it's a fantasy that we seem very attached to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now I want to think about it more like why are we so attached? I don't know. I guess it's
Well, look,
always like a
yeah,
yeah,
there's
existential thing, but
political factors and all these other
for
economic
sure. Yes, some
incentives
people
that have been,
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
other
yeah.
forces at play. But
Yeah.
just like in the interpersonal level, yeah, we do seem to be um pretty, no pun intended, wedded to it.
Mm-hmm. Boom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
And there's always like I have noticed in my brain's always trying to find the out, and I think that's just a normal human thing where brains are trying to find some place where it would have been better if, or it should be like this. If it were like
Yeah,
that, like somehow life would be better. And that maybe seems to be one of those fantasies. I don't know. Okay.
yeah.
I have so many more questions I want to ask you and I'm running out of time. So I want to know about this. So you talk about in your book, wise mind mentality.
Yes.
Yeah, tell
Hmm.
my listeners more about that.
Sure. So when we talk about the kind of coloring, I guess, of our minds, right? We think of like there's the rational side of us and the emotional side of us,
Hmm.
typically, right? Um, And if you ask most people, they say, gosh, I wish I was just always in my rational brain. Life would be so much easier if I got rid of my emotions. And something to remember is no, it wouldn't be. And two, that you do need emotions to think about compassion and other people's feelings, right? Like being too rational has its downsides, but being too emotional also can have its downsides too, right? It can kind of cloud your judgment about something and maybe not see something for what it really is. So,
Yeah.
what the concept of wise mind does is it marries these two. And it's basically a technique to help call upon both sides and have them integrate together.
Mm.
So, I find that myself get really stuck sometimes when I am in a tricky situation. I don't know what to do. I'm feeling really flustered. What you're supposed to do in that instance is to pause and be like, I'm going to call upon my wise mind. What would
Hmm.
wise mind say? And
Hmm.
the trick is to not like try to think of the perfect answer. Just see what arises. Just like first thought, right? And oftentimes it is the thing that you probably should do. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe the first thought is like, I hate this. And then you can pause and be like, what does a wise mind think of this again? And then wait to see
Mm-hmm.
what arises. And it's just a interesting mindfulness and dialectical behavior therapy technique to really take a pause and then kind of integrate these two sides of yourself to give you, an answer that likely has a lot of clarity and a lot of wisdom to it.
Yeah.
And that you already, I like it too because this is just a personal approximation here, but you already know the answer usually. It's just there's all this other stuff kind of clouding it.
I so
So
agree with you.
yeah.
Yeah. What is it like for you when you do that exercise? Is it that you hear a voice? Do you have a knowing? Is there something you
Mhm.
notice in your body? Is it a vision? Like what's it like for you?
Yeah, for me, it's just like my own voice coming. It's interesting. If I think about it like in a physical way, it almost like comes from like the center of my body, kind of like into my head, like
Mm-hmm.
truly like taking the rational side, my brain, and my emotional side of my heart, and kind of like having them talk to each other. And now that I think about
Mm.
it, yeah, for me, it's just like it almost feels like a drop of like, here's the answer. And I'm like, oh, yeah,
Oh, that is
that
the
is what it
answer.
is. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Okay, what else? Okay, so another thing I was curious about is that you talk about the way to look at your emotions as data versus the weather. Tell
hmm
people what you mean.
Yeah. So it's so easy to think of emotions as things that just happen to us, right? We think I
Mm-hmm.
can't help my emotions. And, it's overcome me. Like the word overwhelmed, right? You feel like
Mm-hmm.
you have no control over this. And I'm not saying that you need to have like, white knuckle control over emotions. That's not really the goal here. I think it's instead of feeling like emotions are just happening to you, try to listen to them and be in relationship with them. And I learned about this from a therapist, Grace Hung, who described this idea of emotions as data. And I was like, wow, that is like the perfect way to put it. Your emotions are trying to tell you something. Your
Mm-hmm.
anxiety is trying to tell you something. Even if they don't feel good, it's a signal usually that something's up. Give it some attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's a kinder way to think about how to deal with emotions rather than, oh God, I'm like a victim of, you know, this bad feeling and I'm
Yeah.
being punished. Again, bad things feel bad, but and then you can kind of turn your attention to, okay, well, what is this emotion trying to tell me? How can I do a healthy choice now to regulate and help myself? We talked about how self-regulation earlier is not internal zen.
Yep.
It's giving yourself choice and maintaining choice. And I talk about in the book when emotions feel really big, it feels very physical, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
sweaty palms or your heart's racing. It can be very uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
if you're feeling a very extreme big emotion, um, getting your body to kind of come down is very helpful. And I know no one likes hearing this, but like deep breathing, it does help. But also another interesting shortcut I've learned from this work and my life kit work is the power of cold therapy, like getting an
Mm-hmm.
ice pack. If I'm feeling anxious, sometimes I take an ice pack and I just sit with it for 5 minutes so my body can kind of can
And do you
regulate,
put it on
and
your
then I can
chest or
I
where
put
do
it
you
on
put
my
it?
chest, or I
Yeah.
also have my best friend gave me an eye mask that I can put in the freezer that I love. It goes
Mm.
over my eyes. It's so nice.
Mm.
Um, but things like that or just moving your body a little bit, something to help you get out of your like, oh my God, I can't, I have this big emotion. I don't know how to fix it or, feel it. Regulate your body. You don't, someone told me like, you don't go to the house fire and say, why is this on fire? You put out the fire and then you investigate, right? So
Yes.
that's one way to deal with them. So it's like, so then once you get from that heightened state down to a more regulated state, then you can look at the data, right?
Yeah.
You can use the mindfulness techniques or your wise
Mm.
mind to be like, you know I'm feeling sad. I notice I'm feeling
I
sad.
wonder what's this
And
about.
like
Yeah.
approaching with curiosity and being like, well, why might that be? And thinking through
Mm-hmm.
that rather than and kind of moving through it and processing it. Um, and then maybe uncovering some interesting data. Maybe it's the secondary emotion like we talked about earlier. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
you realize, oh, that's actually shame I'm feeling that's going along
Yeah.
with this emotion. Maybe I'm just going to feel sad right now and let myself feel sad. And those are the times anecdotally I feel like I can move through the emotion in
Yep.
safer way rather
Yep.
than the resistance.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you said earlier about being in relationship with your
Mhm.
emotions. And I think what you described so well is that we really can't do that with very much intention when we don't feel safe in our bodies or when things are too
Yeah.
intense. And so tend to that first, and then you can think about it, learn from it, see what you want to make of it. I love the way that you described that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I mean,
also, oh,
it
go ahead.
just feels help. It just always just feels, I mean, I wrote a book on it, so it feels
Yeah,
helpful to
yeah.
me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you wanted to touch on? I know I've kept you about past what I said I
Let's
would, but
see.
was there anything else we
No,
missed?
you're good. Um, let's see. I would love to talk about values work. I think that's really
Yes.
helpful. Give me actually 1 minute. This is edit. Like you can
Yeah,
edit
yeah, we
something
can
out,
edit
right?
it for sure.
Let me
Hmm.
just tell I have something at 5. I'm just going to tell I'm going to be
Okay.
like 5 minutes late because she's always
Well,
on
and
time.
I actually have
And you have
something at
something.
the top of the hour too,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay. Um, all right. So, okay, I'll make it quick then. Okay. So values work.
Yeah.
So yes, I would love to talk about values because I think it's a really helpful tool for when you are at a crossroad or you're resetting and thinking, what do I want my life to look like? What
Hmm.
changes do I need to make? And the big change for me was getting really specific about oh, sorry, did you hear my
No. Mm-mm.
okay, good. All right, sorry. A noise was made.
Oh no.
Uh Yes. So for me, a big help was to see, instead of having a goal, right? A goal of like getting married, make it have a certain type of job or whatever. Those are so pass fail, right? You either have them or you don't.
Hmm.
And then that just feels pretty cruel to yourself, in my opinion,
Hmm.
about if you don't get those things, you're somehow a failure, right? And instead, if you focus on, okay, well, what are my values? And am I expressing my values? Those can then open up a much more flexible set of options for you, right? It's like, well,
Yes.
okay, I maybe your alleged goal was you want to get married again or have a partner. Okay, well, why do you want that? Well, I want company. Okay, well, I value community. Actually, I'm realizing, and that can look different. That can look like being really involved in this like environmental group that
Hmm.
meets in my community. It could mean volunteering. It could mean making sure I see certain friends more often, right? And then also dating along the side of that. But it's not like the center. I have to only
Yes.
do this one thing. So I think getting really clear about what values you really want to hold close to yourself, and the ones that actually guide your behavior, like paying attention to those are really
Hmm.
important. Because like it's easy to look at a list of values and go, well, all of that's important to me, right?
Hmm.
Like I love all those things. But then when you start to think, how often do your values is your behavior guided by those values? Then you
Yeah.
start to see what's actually really important to you at this time, and thinking about
So true.
what are you having more over attention to, under attention. This is a framework by Kelly Crace. He did the life values inventory. You can take it online free
Hmm.
from the College of William Mary. I highly recommend it. um, but I just think it opens up, when you think about values, all the different ways you can express that, and you'll
For
just
sure.
feel a lot more comfortable, rather than being like, I have to have this one version of something.
Yes. I love it. Megan, you're my type of person.
Oh,
Like you're my
Krista,
type
that's
of
really
person.
sweet.
Okay, listeners. So the book is called Party of One, Be Your Own Best Life Partner. Where can people find you besides your book?
Sure. So you can listen to Life Kit wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on Instagram at Dame Keane. Dame Kane is how, yeah, it looks like Keen, but it's
Okay.
pronounced Kane. And also MeganVKane.com if you just want to follow my work.
Amazing. Thanks so much for coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate it. It was
Oh,
lovely to meet
Krista,
you. Yeah.
lovely to meet you. Thank you so
All
much. I
right. Keep in
appreciate the
touch.
thoughtful interview. Yes.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and want to create a future you can truly get excited about, even after the loss of your spouse, I invite you to join my Mom Goes On coaching program. It's small group coaching just for widowed moms like you, where I'll help you figure out what's holding you back and give you the tools and support you need so you can move forward with confidence. Please don't settle for a new normal that's less than what you deserve. Go to coachingwithkrista.com and click Work With Me for details and next steps. I can't wait to meet you.